You ever have one of those quiet evenings where the world feels a little slower and you just want to sink into something beautiful? The kind of feeling where the lights are low, there's maybe a soft hum in the background, and you're ready to get lost in a story that doesn't rush you. I've been thinking about some games like that lately. The ones that feel less like playing and more like stepping inside a film, where every frame feels alive and every moment lingers. Today I want to share 15 of those experiences with you. Games that felt like I was sitting in a theater but somehow still at home, controller in hand, letting each scene wash over me. So, let's just take our time with this and talk about something beautiful together. There was this strange, quiet afternoon where I found myself wandering into a place that didn't feel like it belonged in the real world, and yet every corner of it felt alive with secrets. Control is one of those experiences you might have missed, but once you step inside, it's hard to let go. The oldest house isn't just a building, it feels like it's breathing, shifting, watching you as you move through its endless halls and impossible spaces. Light spills in at odd angles, dust floats lazily in the air, and sometimes you turn a corner to find a room that shouldn't even exist. I remember moments where I just stand still, listening to the hum of the walls, feeling the weight of something unseen pressing gently on my thoughts. It's a place where the strange becomes familiar and the familiar feels just a little unsettling, and that balance kept me wrapped up in it long after I'd put the controller down. Even now, I think about how it felt to float through the air in silence, the whole world below me bending and shifting as if the building itself was dreaming. You know, there was this one evening when the rain was tapping softly on the window, and I put on a game I'd been meaning to play for a long time, and within minutes, it felt less like a game and more like being pulled into someone's soul. Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice isn't loud or full of endless action. It's quiet in a way that makes you notice every sound, every breath, every shadow curling at the edges of your vision. Walking through its misty forests and broken ruins feels almost like wandering through a dream you're not sure you want to wake from, with voices whispering close enough to feel real, and the air heavy with memories you can't quite place. There's a stillness to it, but also an intensity, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that lingers deep inside long after you've stopped playing. And sometimes, when I think back on it, I remember less the fights and more those small moments. When the light cut through the fog just right, or when Senua stood still, listening to something only she could hear, and I felt like I was right there beside her, holding my breath. There's a certain kind of evening I think about sometimes. The sky painted in soft orange, the air heavy with the smell of grass and sea, and that quiet feeling you get when you know something beautiful and fragile is about to pass. A Plague Tale, Requiem carries that feeling through every step you take. You might have missed this one, but walking with Amicia and Hugo felt less like a story someone told me and more like a memory I lived through myself. The fields swayed gently in the wind, the streets whispered with distant voices, and even the shadows seemed to breathe as the sun slipped behind the hills. There were moments where I'd just stop, not because I had to, but because the world around me felt too alive to rush through, the way the light caught in the dust, or how Hugo's voice would soften when he was trying to be brave. And then there were the harder moments, the ones where the silence grew heavy and the road ahead felt uncertain. But even then, there was this bond between them that kept pulling me forward. It's a journey that stays with you, not because of how it ends, but because of how it feels while you're still walking beside them. There are mornings I still think about, when the sun was just beginning to climb over the hills, painting the world in gold, and the only sound was the soft creak of a saddle as I rode through the mist. Red Dead Redemption 2 has a way of making you feel like you've been somewhere real, somewhere you can still smell the wood smoke and hear the distant call of a train cutting through the quiet. You might have missed this one, but for me, it wasn't just about the gunfights or the outlaw tales. It was about pausing by a river to watch the water shimmer, or riding alongside a friend while the light faded into deep orange, talking about nothing and everything at once. The world felt alive in a way that made even the smallest moments matter, whether it was the sound of rain on your hat or the way a campfire's glow softened the faces around it. And sometimes it wasn't the big missions I remembered most, but those quiet rides under a sky full of stars, where the land stretched out forever and you felt, just for a little while, completely at peace. There are some stories that stay with you, like the memory of a song you can't quite forget, not because they were easy to hear, but because they carried pieces of truth you didn't know you needed. The Last of Us, Part de la Secteur, is one you might have missed. But for me, it was less about the world ending, and more about the quiet spaces in between, the way the light cut through the broken windows of an abandoned store, or how a guitar's soft notes could fill a room heavy with unspoken words. Walking through its overgrown streets felt like stepping into a place both ruined and beautiful, where nature had taken back what people left behind. There were moments I stopped moving just to listen, to the creak of old wood, the rustle of leaves, or the faint hum of wind winding its way through empty buildings. And even though the road was often heavy, it was in the smallest moments, a shared smile, a quiet conversation, the warmth of a campfire, that I found myself holding on the tightest. It's the kind of journey that doesn't just stay in your mind, it lingers in your chest long after you've put it down. Sometimes there's a game that doesn't just pull you in with its story, but with the quiet weight of its world, like standing in a place where every sound feels older than you. God of War 2018 is one of those journeys you might have overlooked, but I still remember how it felt to set out across a cold, endless lake with nothing but the sound of the oars and the distant call of something unseen. The air in that world felt heavy, like it carried all the history of the gods and the mistakes they left behind, yet there was something gentle in the way it unfolded. A father and son, learning each other again while the mountains watched in silence. I'd find myself slowing down, just to listen to Atreus asking questions, or to watch the sunlight break through a gap in the clouds and spill across the water. Even the battles, as fierce as they were, felt like part of a larger rhythm, moments of storm in a long, quiet voyage. And when the world opened up to reveal its hidden paths and forgotten shrines, it felt less like a quest, and more like walking through a story that had been waiting centuries for someone to see it. There's something about Uncharted 4, a thief's end that feels less like playing a game and more like leafing through an old photo album you didn't know you still had. You might have missed this one, but I remember the way the light spilled through the trees in Madagascar, turning the dirt roads golden as the Jeep rumbled along, and how it almost felt like I could smell the dust in the air. There were moments where I just stopped climbing for a while, leaning on a ledge to look out over a horizon so wide it made my chest feel light, or listen to Nate and Sam's quiet banter, not the words themselves but the warmth behind them, like brothers slipping back into a rhythm they'd lost. Even the ruins felt alive, not just old stones but places that had heard laughter, arguments, maybe even farewells long before I ever stepped there. And when the story slowed down, letting you sit in a quiet room or walk through a memory, it reminded me that adventures aren't just about the treasures you find. Sometimes it's about the small, quiet spaces between them, where you realize you're not just chasing history, you're living it. You ever have one of those nights where the city outside your window feels quiet, but you can still see the glow of streetlights painting soft halos in the rain? Detroit. Become Human has that kind of feeling running through it, a world that's alive yet somehow gentle when you stop and really look. You might have missed this one, but I still remember walking through its streets, watching androids go about their lives with these little gestures, the way a hand hovered over a button or a glance lingered just a second too long, like there was more going on under the surface than they could say. There were moments where I didn't rush to the next choice, just stood in the middle of a scene, listening to the faint hum of traffic or the soft shuffle of someone moving in the background, and it felt human. The colors, the lighting, the way conversations would hang in the air. It all had this weight that made every decision feel personal, like you weren't just playing through a story, you were holding it in your hands. And when it ended, I kept thinking about those small pauses and quiet stares, the ones that made me realize how much can be said without a single word. There's this picture in my mind I can't quite shake, stepping off a little boat, looking up and realizing the sky isn't just above me, it's holding a whole city. Bioshock Infinite has that kind of magic, the kind that makes you stop walking just to breathe it in. You might have missed this one, but I still remember drifting through Colombia with the sunlight spilling through clouds, catching the shimmer of buildings gently swaying on their rails. It felt like walking through a dream where every corner had a soft hum of music and every shadow hinted at secrets you weren't supposed to see yet. There were quiet moments too, standing on a balcony, listening to a barbershop quartet sing while the wind carried the smell of sea salt, even though the ocean was nowhere in sight. And then there was Elizabeth, always just a few steps away, her laughter and wonder making the city feel less like a place you explored and more like a story you were living in together. By the time I left, Colombia didn't feel like a backdrop to a game. It felt like a memory I'd accidentally stumbled into, one I know I'll keep revisiting in my head long after the credits rolled. There's something I remember about walking alone in Death Stranding that still feels almost too quiet to talk about. Like if I speak too loudly, I might lose it. You might have missed this one, but it's less about the story on the surface and more about the feeling of moving through a world that doesn't quite trust you yet. I can still see the rolling hills stretching into a sky that can turn dark in a heartbeat, the sound of my boots crunching over wet stones, the slow rhythm of my breath in the cold. Every step felt personal, like I was stitching the land back together just by moving through it. Sometimes I'd stop at the top of a ridge and look down at a valley below, and for a few minutes nothing would happen. Just wind, grass, and that quiet sense of being somewhere you shouldn't be, but needing to be anyway. And when the rain came, it wasn't just weather, it was a reminder that the world could change on you without warning, and you had to carry on anyway. By the end, it wasn't the missions I remembered most. It was those still, lonely walks where the weight on my back felt heavy, but the road ahead somehow felt worth taking. Sometimes I think about the first time I wandered through a misty field in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, and it still feels like I can smell the damp grass. You might have missed this one, but it has a way of making the smallest moments feel like they belong to you. I remember riding Roach along a quiet dirt path, the sun dipping low and turning the whole sky gold, when I heard a soft rustle in the trees. Not a fight, not a quest, just the world breathing around me. The villages felt worn in a way that made them real. Like you could lean against a crooked fence and listen to the distant clink of someone working in a forge. Even the danger had a strange beauty to it, stepping into a dark cave and seeing the faint glimmer of a monster's eyes before you could hear its growl. And when the wind swept over the hills, carrying the scent of rain, I'd find myself slowing down just to let the world speak. It wasn't just about chasing the wild hunt. It was about those quiet stretches in between, where every footstep made you feel like you were part of something older, something still alive in the soil and the shadows. There's a certain stillness I remember from Spec Ops The Line, the kind you don't usually find in war stories, like the air right before a sandstorm swallows the horizon. You might have missed this one, but it's not about winning or losing. It's about the quiet weight that settles on you when the dust finally clears and you see what's left. I can still picture walking through the ruins of Dubai, sunlight bleeding through broken skyscrapers, the wind carrying grains of sand that whispered across the pavement like tiny waves. Every step felt heavier, not because of the enemies ahead, but because of what each scene left behind in your mind. There were moments when the chaos would fade for just a breath, and you'd hear the groan of metal under strain, or catch the far-off echo of a voice that didn't sound quite right. It's strange, the game surprised me not with its battles, but with the way it made me stop, think, and notice the world collapsing around me in slow motion. It stayed with me long after, like a half-forgotten dream that still tugs at you when the night is quiet. There's a certain kind of quiet that doesn't feel safe, and I still remember finding it in Alien: Isolation. Not the soft quiet of a peaceful night, but the kind where every creak in the floor or faint hum of a light makes your chest tighten just a little. You might have missed this one, but stepping onto Sevastopol station felt like walking into a place that had already given up hope, where the air seemed heavier and the shadows seemed just a little too deep. I can still see the way the dust hung in the light of a flickering bulb, or how the station's old machinery clanked in the distance like it was sighing in its sleep. Sometimes I'd hide in a locker and hear nothing for a long time, until a single footstep echoed somewhere far away, slow and deliberate, and I'd hold my breath without even thinking about it. What surprised me most wasn't the fear, but how personal it felt, like the station itself was quietly watching, waiting, deciding whether to let me go. Even now, I can close my eyes and feel that stillness again, like I'm back in those empty corridors, listening for something I hoped would never come. Sometimes I think about places that feel like they've been waiting for you long before you ever arrived. and Horizon Zero Dawn is one of them. You might have missed this one, but walking through its world felt like stepping into a dream where the earth had healed in ways you didn't expect. Tall grass swaying in the wind, mountains wearing crowns of snow, and the ruins of something ancient quietly sleeping beneath it all. I remember moving through a valley at sunset, the light painting the metal beasts in warm gold, and for a moment they didn't feel like enemies at all, just part of the land, like deer or birds. There were little moments too, like crouching in flowers as their petals brushed against your arm, or hearing a distant mechanical roar and feeling your stomach sink even though the view was so peaceful. What stayed with me wasn't just the beauty, but the way it made me feel small in a comforting way, like I was part of a story the world had been telling long before I ever set foot in it. There's a certain kind of silence you only notice when the wind is moving, not empty but alive, and Ghost of Tsushima is wrapped in that kind of quiet. You might have missed this one, but I still remember riding through fields of swaying grass, where the ground looked like it was breathing, and the only sound was the rustle of leaves guiding me towards something I couldn't see yet. Sometimes I'd stop on a cliff just to watch the clouds drift over the sea, the horizon fading into a soft blur, while the sun dipped low and turned everything gold. Even the moments between battles felt important, following a fox through the forest or watching petals scatter across the water like they were carrying some old story away. It never felt like I was rushing anywhere. Instead, the island seemed to unfold at its own pace, letting me wander through it like a guest who was welcome to stay as long as I needed. I think that's a good place to pause for now. It's been really nice just sitting here with you, wandering through those 15 cinematic video games that feel just like movies. They're the kind of worlds that stay with you, not just because of what happens in them, but because of how they make you feel. And I'm glad we could share that feeling together. If you feel like leaving a thought or coming back another time, you're always welcome. There's no rush, no pressure. Just a quiet place to return to whenever you want. Thank you for spending this time with me, and I hope wherever you are, the rest of your day feels gentle and kind. I'll see you again when the moment feels right.